Welcome everyone to the October 3rd, 2017 meeting of the Santa Rosa City Council. Will you please call the roll, Ms. Gomez?
Let the record show that all council members are present with the exception of Council Member Sawyer.
And we had no closed session today? Oh, Mr. Tibbetts isn't here yet either.
And Vice Mayor Tibbetts, thank you.
And we're expecting Mr. Tibbetts. We're not expecting Councilman Sawyer tonight. Is that correct? We had no study session. Proclamations 5.1, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Ms. Combs.
Thank you. Madeline O'Connor, want to come on down? Thank you so much. Hello.
Of course.
I will be reading this and then you'll say a few words.
Yes, I will.
So please come on down. Thank you. And thank you for the work you're doing. Whereas the City of Santa Rosa recognizes that domestic violence affects 1 in 4 families in our local community, and that the domestic violence violates an individual's privacy, dignity, and security based on the systematic use of emotional, physical, sexual, psychological, and economic control or abuse. Whereas the YWCA Sonoma County is a community-based, not-for-profit organization affiliated with the YWCA USA, YWCA Sonoma County embodies its mission to empower, educate, and advocate for domestic violence survivors and their children who find they are unsafe in their own homes. YWCA Sonoma County operates our community's only confidential safe house shelter, the only 24/7 domestic violence crisis hotline, and the only therapeutic preschool serving one of our most vulnerable populations, children aged 3 to 5. And whereas domestic violence is a serious crime that affects people of all races, sexes, ages, sexual orientation, and income levels, stopping the cycle of vicious criminal assault in the home requires a coordinated effort between the criminal justice system and the agencies that provide services to the victims, primarily reliant on the strong resolve and the immense courage of survivors. And whereas only a collaborative community effort will put an end to the cycle of domestic violence, members of our community are encouraged to participate in the YWCA's scheduled events and programs to support their mission to eliminate domestic violence in Sonoma County through awareness, education, and empowerment. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Chris Corsi, Mayor of the City of Santa Rosa, on behalf of the entire City Council, does hereby proclaim October 2017 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council, Julie could not say it better than the proclamation says it itself, and I'm so grateful to you for reading it in such great detail. My name is Madeline Keegan O'Connell. I'm fortunate to be the CEO of the YWCA, and on behalf of our Board of Directors, our staff, our volunteers, and certainly the clients in our care, we gratefully accept your proclamation. I want you to know how important it is that I am surrounded by all of these lovely people who have taken their time out of their workday to stand with me and represent YWCA and our partnership with the Santa Rosa Police Department. Detectives and officers are such an important partner of ours, and I'm really thrilled that we have our advocates. These are the real heroes of the YWCA. I am merely the spokesperson. These are the people that work day in and day out with victims of domestic violence right here in Santa Rosa. I'm so thrilled to bring you the October 2017 calendar of events, and I've shared it with you. You have it there at your desks. I'm bringing along my purple tote bag here. That's from the Allstate Foundation, and you have a chance, everyone in this room who has been so gracious in wearing our purple ribbon, to help us raise money to support our cause. We are a nonprofit organization, and we rely heavily on our community for support. I want to bring to your attention one of the items on our calendar which we featured on the back, and this is an opportunity for dinner and a movie. Now, I know you all work very hard, but you got to take some time out every once in a while. Join us at Mary's on October 26th. And come and see Jennifer Newsom's film from the Representation Project. This is The Mask You Live In. And this was an opportunity we were brought to us by the Commission on the Status of Women, and we're thrilled to partner with them and share this movie. On October 19, we're going to be all over the county, including all over Santa Rosa, looking for you to wear purple to support us. And of course, the matching donations with the Purple Purse are very important as well. So thanks, everybody, for having us back. Thank you for your support of our mission. We've been around since 1975, and we're going to be around as long as you need us to keep Sonoma County families safe from harm. Thank you.
If I may say thank you again, I had the occasion of going with a family to the Family Justice Center last week. Met with Maria, who was with the Y, who really handled the situation very well. And it's so nice to know that we have that kind of coordinated program. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie. Thanks.
Thank you all for all the work you do. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mayor Corsi.
Thank you.
Not all the people.
You can get all the people if you want.
Guys, come in here. Come in here.
And there's your proclamation.
Okay, love it.
Okay. Scuttle up here. Thank you.
I do have a couple of cards for public comment on this. Peter Trideff.
Peter Chernoff, thank you very much. I just want to let you know that I think Madeline probably deserves an extra week vacation and a raise. And that in the promised land, there's no such thing as domestic abuse. In the promised land, there's no such thing as slaughterhouses. And I have shared over and over again that some of the most powerful people we've ever been taught to look up to, Yeshua Mashiach, Jesus, Gandhi, Einstein, Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, Coretta Scott King, the grandson of Malcolm X, Malcolm Shabazz, and thousands of others were all vegans. Vegans are not violent. We are all spiritual beings. And what was given a long time ago was that we were given domain over the earth and the animals to love and take care of them, and that is furthest from what's going on. And the reason that these women have to work so hard at trying to protect children is because most people listening in the sound of my voice have got refrigerators filled of murdered, filthy, rotting, vaccinated animal flesh, animals that love life just as well as any one of us. And in the promised land, this does not exist. I've shared this, I've asked, I've yelled, I've written poems, I'm tired of asking, so I am tasking. I'm taking the iron rod now to wield across every battlefield. Justice it will yield. The iron rod be now at hand to make make real every almighty command, till having attained the promised land. Powerful deceivers pulled down from high places, corruptions cleansed and left no traces. All children, all animals, all smiles on their faces. And so the other proclamation will deal with fires. And I've told you about firewalls with cactus, but you never talk to me. So here's what's going to happen. I am going to command that the slaughterhouses be turned down. I'm going to command that the West Coast be shut down. I am commanding that these slaughterhouses be burned. You will see more fires than you've seen in a long time. I am shutting down the West Coast as of this full moon until D.C. and Wall Street and this illusion is burnt toast. I have said it, you hear it, so it will be.
Colleen Fernald.
Good afternoon. Purple ribbons aren't enough. Julie Combs, will you please ask Julie, your administrator, why I still haven't got a phone call on scheduling an appointment with your city attorney? The City of Santa Rosa Police Department, District Attorney Joe Ravitch, Child Protective Services, Judges Bertulli and Chateau. Because this city and that DA chose not to press charges against John Charles Molinari, not only for him raping me with his teenage daughter in the home, but the evidence I had supplied to this police department, as well as Santa Rosa's and the FBI, of his involvement in prostitution, telephone numbers with the 916 area code. He was producing pornography. I'm not certain the girls were 18 or not. That's what I asked you, Chief Schwedhelm, then to investigate. So this rings hollow. As a victim of sexual assault, not getting my needs met for 3 years before my child was found dead hanging from a tree, supposedly. I drove by your police department on this very event day with your purple ribbons. You had purple flags out there for every victim of sexual assault, and mine wasn't there. And because of the obstruction of justice, my child was murdered, second degree, maybe first. And I want to resolve it without lawyers, except for your city attorney who had said she'd schedule a second appointment with the police department's attorney. I had to take my public comment time to make it public again here. I said, I don't like that. Did I get a phone call? You don't have a subcommittee. My needs aren't being met. I can't get to work on all the other problems until this one's resolved. And I can work better without carrying this bag of trauma. So your purple ribbon, your resolutions are hollow until you change policies. All victims of sexual assault, and especially witnesses that are children, deserve a polygraph and every form of lie detection possible, whether you're a victim of Bill Cosby or John Charles Molinari. And to let politics or anything else get in the way of my justice in all this aftermath, to do nothing, change your policy. If I go to a clinic or a doctor and say, I had unconsensual sex, I didn't say rape, I used survivor talk, and they didn't record it, they didn't hear it, I want a tape recorder for every person who says this so nothing's misunderstood. I can't get a meeting with my doctor who delivered my baby, Charlotte, and the head of Sonoma County Health Clinics to get this as a policy so I can heal. Just had to walk by Jill Ravitch at the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors because she wouldn't press charges against the man who shot me with an air rifle in an illegal pot grow when I was running for city council. I said, you can't have an illegal grow. Did they do anything about that shooter? He's still free to hurt you because he's a major addict.
Thank you, Ms.
My needs aren't being met.
Thank you.
Can you get me an appointment? So I don't have to yell. I can use my nicer voice and we can resolve a lot more problems.
You're done, thank you. 5.2 is proclamation, Fire Prevention Week. I think Mr. Rogers has this one.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the recipient is Mr. Lowenthal, our Assistant Fire Marshal. Me today. Oh. So whereas the City of Santa Rosa is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living and visiting our city, whereas U.S. fire departments responded to 365,500 home fires in 2015, according to the National Fire Protection Association, and whereas U.S. home fires resulted in 2,560 civilian deaths in 2015, representing the majority, 78%, of all U.S. fire deaths. And whereas many of today's products and furnishings produce toxic gases and smoke when burned, making it difficult to see and breathe within moments, and whereas these conditions contribute to a much smaller window of time for people to escape a home fire safely, with people having as little as 1 to 2 minutes to escape from the time the smoke alarm sounds. And whereas a home fire escape plan includes 2 exits from every room in the home, a path to the outside from each exit, smoke alarms in all required locations, and a meeting place outside where everyone in the home will meet upon exiting. And whereas the Santa Rosa Fire Department is dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention and protection education. And whereas the 2017 Fire Prevention Week theme, Every Second Counts, Plan 2 Ways Out, effectively serves to educate the public about the vital importance of developing a home fire escape plan with all members of the household and practicing it twice a year. Now therefore be it resolved by Chris Corsi, Mayor of the City of Santa Rosa, on behalf of the entire City Council, it does hereby proclaim October 8th through 14th, 2017 as Fire Prevention Week.
Great. Mayor Corsi. Mayor Corsi, members of council, thank you very much for this proclamation and recognition of Fire Prevention Week. Annually, the National Fire Protection Association, also known as NFPA, puts out a theme to the country, and it's focused on typically a school-age-based program that's delivered throughout the United States. And for us here locally, I just had a couple of items I wanted to cover for you in recognition of Fire Prevention Week. Beginning next week, Monday the 9th through Thursday the 12th, we'll be out to our elementary schools. There's 12 schools that we will be visiting. We will have our fire department staff out conducting 23 assemblies and focusing on emergency drills, the use of the 911 system, also talking about the necessities for the home fire escape plans, how that incorporates into the family picture, not just the elementary school age focus. And we'll also have some other fun activities that we engage the kids with, the teachers with, and make it a lasting memory for them. Also, the other item that we have on the 14th, which will be Saturday the 14th, we have 2 open houses where we will have Station 2, located at 65 Stony Point Road, open to the community between the hours of 10 a.m. and 12 p.m., and also Station 4, located at 1775 Guadalupe Avenue. It will be open for all our citizens to come in and guest and visit our local firefighters, so they have an opportunity to engage and see what goes on and takes place there. And the last item that typically is our most popular item is Fire Chief for a Day. And this is an extremely popular program. It's focused on our 3rd grade classes. And what it is we have the children use their creative artistic abilities to draw posters for us. And what they're focusing on is demonstrating their understanding of that national theme. So as you mentioned this year, it's on escape plans. So they'll be incorporating that into their plan. In September, we unroll the information, the instructions, and the materials to the schools that would like to participate. In October, we go back out to those same schools, we collect that information, we evaluate what's been submitted, and then we select typically up to 20 kids from various schools that have participated. And then those kids have the ability to, number one, miss a day of school, which is always exciting, and they come down to our Fire Station 1 located just down the street here on Sonoma Avenue, and they will get an in-depth tour of the station and the apparatus. Then, if available, they take a ride on Rosie, our trolley, over to the fire department training tower, where they interact and do hands-on activities with our fire crews. They ride in the apparatus, which is a lot of fun for them and their family. And then we conclude that by whisking them back over to Station 1 to where they can have lunch with our Fire Chief, Tony Gosner, and all of our crews. So for us, that typically brings our program to a close. It's very exciting for us. The kids enjoy it, their families enjoy it, so we conclude this educational month, if you will, with smiles all around, which is always fun. And again, I just want to thank you very much for taking the time to recognize Fire Prevention Week. It's a huge part of what we do. Education drives that understanding of how to react during some type of an emergency, because we all know emergencies will happen. It's a matter of when, and being prepared is the only thing that we can do to help ourselves. So thank you very much for the time and the proclamation.
Great. Thank you, Scott. We have no staff briefings tonight. City Manager McGlynn, any report tonight?
Yes. The city will be hosting 3 outreach meetings on Monday, October 9th, relating to several housing action plan initiatives that are currently underway, including density bonus policy update, inclusionary housing policy, updates on accessory dwelling unit policy, planning process improvements, and design review process update. While meetings are open to all who want to attend, the first 2 meetings will be focused roundtable discussions with specific groups, housing developers and affordable housing providers. And the 3rd meeting will be a general community workshop to allow time and space for everyone to provide input. The times for the 3 meetings are as follows: Housing Developers Roundtable, 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m., Affordable Housing Providers Roundtable, 1:30 to 3 p.m., Community Workshop, 6 to 7:30 p.m., and the location will be the Finley Community Center Auditorium, 2060 West College Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Ms. City Attorney?
I have nothing to report today.
Thank you. Move on. Are there any statements of abstention by council members for this meeting? Seeing none, we'll move on to mayors and council members' reports. Mr. Oliveris.
Thank you, Mayor. This surely is a very sad week for our country, and I know you will be providing a message to the community in your role as mayor when you speak, but there have been good things going on in our community as well. Last week I did attend the State of the Latino Community at Sonoma State, very, very well attended, as it has been in past years. Also attended the Children's Museum annual fundraiser at John Ash. But one event that really touched my heart was an event at the Seventh-day Adventist Church here on Sonoma Avenue. Adam Peacock from City Life Fellowship, he's also a member of our Violence Prevention Partnership policy team. He and other congregations pulled together volunteers and volunteer medical professionals dealing with dental and vision care and other service providers at the church, where they provided free services to many of our homeless population. They did this on Friday and Sunday. I arrived there to welcome the volunteers on Friday morning, and folks were already lining up for services, but I do want to extend my gratitude to Adam and for the volunteers that provided those services. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers? Nothing? Mr. Schwedel?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I also attended the Lucian event at Sonoma State, and it was fascinating to see the diverse members of the community coming together on this very important event. And Mr. City Manager, I do appreciate the number of city staff that also attended, because I think there's a lot of information for all. And then later that night, I attended the city's presentation about the pilot program at the Turk Round Barn. Again, interesting community dialogue that I think the city is doing a nice job of actually sharing the strategies that we're trying to incorporate with some of our more challenging situations. And then this weekend, on both Friday and Saturday, I participated in the Levi's Grand Fondo, both the festival on Friday and then marshaled on Saturday. And what I heard that they may be coming to a downtown near you for next year for their 10th anniversary. So my hope would be that it is going to be something, because seeing 3,500 bike riders really celebrating the community and the beauty of Sonoma County was really a beautiful day.
Ms. Combs?
I too had the opportunity to attend at least the first half of the homeless event at the Deturk Barn, and again want to thank staff for making that community conversation about homelessness go as smoothly as it did, with support staff at each of the tables and a lot of sort of ability for the neighbors to talk about what was on their minds. I also had the good fortune to attend the CASA Steering Committee meeting. It was the first meeting of the CASA Steering Committee. This is the committee that was essentially put together, I guess, by Steve Heminger of MTC to make a blue ribbon panel for addressing housing issues, and this was the first steering committee meeting. Fred Blackwell is one of the chairs. He's the chief executive officer of the San Francisco Foundation. Leslie Corsilia is an executive director of Silicon Valley at Home, and Michael Covarrubias is the chief executive officer of TMG Partners. And so they sort of kicked us off. We had introductions, got to know each other a little bit. Senator Wiener came and spoke briefly on the package that was at that time still on the governor's desk. I think each of us discussed our goals for what was going to come out of that meeting. Some of the key phrases were working out the balance between finding an order of magnitude solutions or breakout solution for housing in the Bay Area versus incremental change, finding lots of little things that worked. There's a little tension in the room for, wouldn't it be nice if we could just figure out one great silver bullet, and a lot of folks saying we'll take what we can get in steps. But the idea in the room is to have what was called the grand bargain. So many people in the room were from a variety of business, city governments, and various stakeholders. So there's all the folks who have opinions about how housing should be built, trying to come together and find a remarkable solution. One of the things that happened that was a surprise was apparently the State Transportation Improvement Program, STIP, has some extra funds that they didn't expect to have. So one of the questions asked of us was, did we support linking state transportation funds, particularly these STIP funds, with housing performance, production performance, when they were awarded? And the first question was, should it be awarded to the jurisdiction with the best performance in housing, permitting, and streamlining? And the second was, should MTC withhold funding from jurisdictions producing less than a certain percentage of their RENA numbers for low, very low, and moderate income? And that was a hotly discussed topic. Without having had the opportunity to come back and talk with you about it, I suggested that referring to the first one as the carrot and the second one as the stick, that we would always welcome carrots. We are happy to have carrots if we're eligible for them. And I talked about the importance of making sure that North Bay cities and counties were eligible even though we didn't have BART, because there used to be a lot of ties to BART. And with the second one, I suggested phasing in sticks if necessary, but seeing if carrots worked first, because sometimes there's a vicious cycle. If you withhold funding for something, then you don't get funding for something else. So that's the quick discussion of the program. I brought extra copies of packets from the meeting, and I'm happy to share them with anyone who wants them, and to give a more detailed conversation later. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor? Thank you. I just want to mention to the council that I'm going to be out of town the next few days, going to Santa Fe, New Mexico with the Mayor's Institute on City Design. This is a group, part of the conference, the National Conference of Mayors. It's funded by a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts that's paying my way to go to this conference. Former Mayor Bartley was invited to this 4 years ago. Former Mayor Sawyer was invited 2 years ago. And I asked why we are so lucky. This is eight mayors that get together to talk about projects and dreams and goals in their cities. And they are aided in their discussions by subject matter experts in finance and architecture and planning and other fields. So it's a real benefit to the city. And I asked why we're so lucky to be 3 times in 5 years. And the answer was that Santa Rosa is a place where things are happening. So I think that we should all feel proud of that. And I will be talking to them about our housing goals, and particularly focus on getting housing of all types and for all incomes downtown. And I'll report back to you later on this month on how that goes. With that, let's move on to approval of minutes. of September 5th. Are there any corrections or additions to that set of minutes? And we'll show those approved as submitted. Mr. McGlynn, the consent calendar, please.
Item 11.1, resolution, contract extension, Fifth Amendment to Professional Service Agreement 008687 with PFM Asset Management LLC for investment advisory services. Item 12.2, resolution approving professional service agreement with R3 Consulting Group Incorporated to develop a zero waste plan for the city of Santa Rosa.
Council, are there any questions on these items? I have no cards. Mr. Tibbetts.
I move item 12.1 and 12.2 of the consent calendar and waive further reading of the text.
Second.
And are we working on the iPads tonight, Ms. Gomez?
I did. I thought it was okay.
There we go. Your votes.
Councilmember Schwedhelm? Thank you.
And that passes with 6 ayes. Councilmember Sawyer is absent and will be for the balance of the meeting. Ms. Geller, we are ahead of schedule on public comment. And can we start the public hearing and hold public comment until after the public hearing? The public comment on items not on the agenda?
We need to wait on both of those items until
Because the
5.
public hearing is also 5 o'clock.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to take a break then. We will reconvene at 5 o'clock. Could I get the council members in the room to take your seats? We'll get the meeting back in session. We'll bring the meeting back to order. We'll take comments from the public on items not on the agenda to begin. And I have a card from David Sims.
I've used this before.
There's a toggle switch on your right hand there. It'll lift it up. Nope, down lower.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, and City Council members. My name is David Sims. I live on Brookside Drive in Santa Rosa. I've lived there since 1997, and I want to talk a few minutes about Doyle Park and the increasing severity of the homelessness problem there. And I know this isn't the most important topic in the country today, but it is a matter of local concern. And I know that homelessness is one of the city's top priorities. And I appreciate Council Member Coombs's report from the housing meeting and for talking with me during the break about that. This is a difficult subject to address. I don't want to appear insensitive to the plight of the people camping in Doyle Park. I speak with them frequently. Most are very nice, interesting people to talk with. But it's not appropriate to use Doyle Park as a homeless encampment. The city appears to be turning a blind eye to the situation there. And in a way, that's a breach of trust between the city and the residents and taxpayers of Santa Rosa who've supported the park for generations with their tax dollars. Doyle Park is a community family park. It's intended and funded as a place where families and other groups can have picnics and birthday parties, where people play sports, where parents can take their children to play on the playground equipment, as I did when my two daughters were young. But now there are people camped on that playground equipment and on those tables and under those tables every night. The entire west half of the park seems completely overrun with people who are sleeping in the park, staying there all day, living out of their cars. We hear and see fights, angry fights that sound like they're fueled by meth. We see what looks like drug deals, cars coming into the park, things being passed in and out of windows. And as someone who's valued and used and loved that park for many years, I worry that this behavior deters the people who should be using the park for more positive recreational experiences. And I can understand from the point of the view of the city, you have a larger homeless problem. And in a way, Doyle Park might look like a convenient solution. It's out of sight. It's not as visible as Howarth or Juliet Parks. It may seem a good place to park a problem for a while, but that's not why the taxpayers of Santa Rosa have invested and supported this car park for so long. So what can I ask you to do? I know that homelessness is a complex problem. There's no easy fix, and there's limits to the actions you can take to help this situation. But there are several things you can do right now to help protect Doyle Park, and one of these is to encourage the city's police department to enforce regulations that are already on the books, rules that are intended to prevent the park from becoming a camp, specifically rule number 1324.040, which prohibits camping, tents, shelters, sleeping bags, and rule 1324.033, which prohibits bathing in the park. We look to you to restore the trust of the nearby residents and taxpayers who've supported the park. Please don't use our community park as a homeless camp. Help Doyle Park remain the vital recreational resource it has been for many years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Colleen Fernald.
Can we wait for Julie? Let someone else go?
Proceed, please.
All right. Okay, I don't like to lose my patience, and I do like speaking from the heart, but I don't like speaking from that kind of deep pain. So hope I will be getting a call from your office very soon. And so just like Andy Lopez's family deserves an apology at this late stage in that tragedy, I deserve an apology formally from this city on the death of Charlotte Molinari, the fact that there are rapists still loose, John Charles Molinari. And then the reform I'm seeking in how you investigate sexual assault, domestic violence. We also have to get to the fact that there may be more victims of Dylan Zara and how your sexual assault, domestic violence force dropped the ball on that, as well as the district attorney's office. Tracy Carilla was the prosecutor. How you deal with missing children, especially when they were witnesses to domestic violence and sexual assault. How you deal with environmental crimes, and this is why I want our history opened up based on my addresses and why these may still be a problem for other people there. How you deal with fake information when it's in police reports. So this comes down to auditing of the auditor and using my case as an example of what needs to be changed. And I want to move this away from my public comment times because we have a lot more dead bodies in our country as a result of people thinking they can solve the problems of violence with violence, don't we? And our country is not a union of states, is it? That's not going to solve your money problems, trying to sue it. As I made the point, all these issues of trying to make your basic needs taken care of, from infrastructure on to housing and protecting the environment, all these are symptoms of the crisis of the Constitution not being upheld. Asking you to use your oath to make the change in the legislature. Doesn't matter what person is serving in Congress. 2/3 of the states on the same page, embracing Article 5, just like they did for the big bad banks and Occupy and taking them to the cleaners and getting a little out. You can do the same with unconstitutional wars of choice, Citizens United, the Patriot Act, anything else that Congress, the Supreme Court, or the President is doing that's not working. 2/3 of the same page on those issues, you can make that change fundamentally. Because if you want to change anything constitutionally, you make an amendment. We've done that successfully. So the War Powers Act was a tricky dick trick that was never corrected. And none of your representatives, from Boxer to Feinstein to Kamala Harris, are working on fixing that. It was only Barbara Lee. So again, when I'm compelling you to call on Thompson and Huffman to make that change of unconstitutional war power, so you set an example for the teens and for your police. No one strikes first. Thank you.
That's all the cards I have for public comment on items not on the agenda. We'll move on to our public hearing this evening.
Item 14.1, public hearing, district-based city council elections, composition of districts, California Voting Rights Act, Sue Gallagher, city attorney, presenting.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. We're back this evening to talk about the California Voting Rights Act. Tonight will be the first of a series of 5 public hearings for the purpose of gathering information and then responding, the later public hearings to respond to mapping of the proposed districts for the transition of the city from at-large to district-based elections. I'm going to tonight give a little bit of background to set the stage. We've discussed this before, but I think it's helpful to set the stage. And as we go forward, each of the public hearings will probably give a briefer and briefer introduction to the setting, and then moving into the criteria for mapping.
Sue, would you raise your microphone up just a little bit so it's closer?
Very good, so that you can hear me a little bit better.
Thank you.
Thank you. As you know, the city currently elects the city council members through an at-large election system. We have elections every other year, and the elections are staggered, so 4 council members are elected in one election cycle, and then 2 years later, the other 3 seats are filled. In each cycle, those candidates that get the most votes citywide earn earn a 4-year term on the council. Last July, the city received a certified letter alleging that that system of at-large elections violates the California Voting Rights Act. And that letter threatened to file suit if the city did not voluntarily shift to district-based elections. So, what is the California Voting Rights Act? I know we've discussed this before, so I'll try to keep this brief. The California Voting Rights Act is designed to help protect the voting rights of minority voters. It expands the protections of the Federal Voting Rights Act, and it does expressly apply to charter cities. And indeed, the courts have confirmed that the California Voting Rights Act is a matter of statewide concern and will preempt any local provisions that violate its terms. So the key provision of the Voting Rights Act, and for this I am going to simply read it because it is critical to the analysis. The Voting Rights Act prohibits the use of an at-large election system, and this is the quote, in a manner that impairs the ability of a protected class to elect candidates of its choice or to influence the outcome of an election. So if we take that statement apart, there's really 4 elements. The first is that the city has an at-large election system, and as I just said, we do have that system. Voters of the entire city vote for and elect the members of the council. Second element is the presence of a protected class. The letter that we received alleged that we have a significant Latino population, which of course we do. Latinos are a protected class under federal law. Third element is whether the jurisdiction has racially polarized voting. That means that the voters in the protected class tend to vote as a block and prefer candidates or choices that are different from those that are preferred by voters not in the protected class. So in our case, it would be that the Latino voter population in general votes, prefers certain candidates and electoral positions, and non-Latino voters may prefer a different candidate or electoral choice. The fourth element is whether that system then impairs the voting rights of the protected class. In other words, if not in an at-large system where the vote is citywide, if the majority non-Latino vote tends to vote as a block, that may tend to consistently override the vote of the minority Latino community. Under the California Voting Rights Act, a claim is initiated by sending a certified letter to the city clerk, and that is the letter that we received back in mid-July. It was a letter sent by attorney Kevin Shankman, who is an attorney out of Malibu, representing the Southwest Voter Registration Education Project, which is a group I understand is headquartered in Texas, but of course has members across the United States. Again, that letter, I'll skip through these pretty quickly because that letter does allege that we have racially polarized voting within the city and that racially polarized voting has combined with our at-large election system to impair the ability of our Latino voters to elect candidates of their choice or to influence the outcome of elections. Again, they threatened to file suit, so we looked at the ramifications. If the demographic and statistical evidence confirms that there's a violation of the Voting Rights Act, the ramifications are actually quite significant. First, if we go to court and court finds that our system is in violation of the Voting Rights Act, the court itself can impose district-based elections. It can design the mapping. It can shift the election cycles. It really becomes within the jurisdiction of the court to shape our system. If we were to fight the Voting Rights Act litigation and lose, the city would be liable for the plaintiff's attorney's fees, and as we've discussed before, those attorney's fees can be very substantial. Those cities that entered into a quick settlement may be settled for in $50,000 to $100,000 range, but those cities that have fought the litigation have incurred very substantial costs. This is the Palmdale situation where they were hit with attorney's fees of about $4.5 million plus interest. So this was all presented to you back in August, and based on all of the evidence that was before you, you did decide to move forward with a voluntary transition of the city to district elections. You adopted a resolution of intent to do that. Again, that is a resolution only of intent, so it is still within your jurisdiction and within your power, your discretion, whether at the end of the day you move forward or not. There are safe harbor provisions, which we've also discussed, which sets us on a very quick timeline. Under the safe harbor provisions, the attorney's fees would be capped at $30,000 if the city adopted the resolution of intent within 45 days of the date of the letter received. The council did that back on August 29th when it's adopted its resolution of intent. The safe harbor provision then requires that within 90 days of that resolution of intent, you hold 5 public hearings and then do the final adoption of an ordinance to transition the city. 2 of those public hearings are before any maps are drawn. This is the first of those 2 initial public hearings. The second public hearing prior to the drafting of maps will be next week on the 10th. There will then be 2 public hearings after draft maps are prepared and posted, and we'll give you those dates. November 1st is the first one, and then November 14th, I believe. And then there'll be a final, the 5th public hearing is the date when the council can consider introducing an ordinance to actually decide on the mapping. Before I move forward, we are in this process. Actually, I probably have, I do have this. The maps will be drafted in consultation with our demographer, and we do have our demographer here this evening. And there will be extensive outreach, public outreach and engagement. In addition to the 5 public hearings before the council, there will be several community meetings and also CAB meetings and other opportunities to have input. We also have a website that's now online, and within the next week or 2, we will have some interactive programs there where folks can actually play with maps and propose their own versions. The final district boundaries will be set by ordinance, and again, that we are anticipating that ordinance will be introduced on November 14th, and then will be up for your consideration for final adoption on November 21st. Those district boundaries that the council determines and adopts will be in place then for the election in November 2018. And the district boundaries are revisited after each census, so they will be in effect for a number of years. So what are the criteria? And again, we'll start this process tonight of actually starting the process of shaping the districts. So the basic criteria are that each council district should contain a nearly equal population. So we'll be dividing the city into 7 districts, and I'll get to that number in a minute. The district plan must comply with both the California and the Federal Voting Rights Act. And race shall not be the predominant factor for district boundaries, although there is a bit of a delicate balance in there, because what we're trying to address is a potential violation of the California Voting Rights Act, which of course the nature of that violation is racially based, that the Latino voters their rights are being impaired by our at-large voting system. So there is a delicate balance in there, but again, under federal law, race cannot be the predominant factor. Continuing the mandatory criteria for district maps, by charter, we have 7 council members. So we will be continuing with that number. The mayor, by charter, the mayor is selected by a vote of the council members, of the elected council members. So I know there have been some discussions that perhaps we could have an at-large mayor and 6 council members, but the charter precludes that. The charter does set forth the process for selecting the mayor, and it is through the selection by the 7 elected members. The charter also provides for 4-year terms. So I know in the past there's been some discussion that perhaps we do a clean slate in November 2018 and have all new council members. That cannot occur under our current charter. The 4 members that were elected in 2016 are entitled to serve out their 4-year term. And so we will be looking at 3 open seats in the November 2018 election. Optional additional factors to consider, and I think our demographer will probably get into these a little bit more. Communities of interest. We might also look at other jurisdictional boundaries that are within the city boundaries, I'm sorry. So for example, school districts or school attendance zones. We're going to be looking to create districts that are compact and contiguous. We're also going to be looking at natural and man-made geographical or topographical features. So we might look at roads or mountains, valleys, rivers, things like that. We'll also may want to look at ensuring that each district includes public facilities, so that when the districts are being drafted, not all the parks are in one district, not all of the fire stations are in one district, not all the police stations, those kinds of factors. We may want to be looking at that. When I say we, it's really the council, I should be saying, will be looking at these, although staff and the demographer will be looking at these as we draft maps to present to you for decision. Each district also, we may want to consider whether each district includes commercial interests. And in particular, that relates to our downtown and how we want to deal with the downtown. Whether you want it divided up or whether you want it all in one district, how you want to deal with that. The other big issue for us is, of course, the annexation of Roseland. The Roseland community, the annexation is moving forward, and we do anticipate that it will be final and be in effect as of November 1st. So it will be in effect, we anticipate, prior to your final vote on district boundaries. So again, our next steps, we'll have we're going to be receiving public comment and public input prior to the mapping 2 public hearings tonight and next week, next Tuesday. A community meeting has been scheduled on October 19th. Actually, the way it's been scheduled at this point is that there will be 2 different sessions, one in the afternoon and one in the evening. One, I understand, will be over the west side of town, and one will probably be in the downtown area. We do have the website again, and we are receiving comments and proposals are coming through the website and are being gathered by our city clerk, so that it will be a very active process.
Ms. Gallagher, can we say what the website is, what that URL is?
Yes, I think I'll ask Ms. Gomez to give that site.
It's srcity.org/speakup/district elections to provide your comments.
So just in addition, I just wanted to add to the city attorney's comment, it'll be a total of 5 public community meetings, 1 in each quadrant of the city and 1 in the downtown.
And we'll clarify, some of those community meetings are specific and exclusive on district elections, and a couple of them are CAB meetings that will also have other topics available for discussion as well.
Okay, so 2 of those will take place on the 19th? And,
yes.
And the others are yet to be scheduled?
We can get we'll get the council the dates. There are, I believe, 4 of them have been scheduled today.
We currently have one on Wednesday, October 11th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at Roseland Community Center. That's a CAB meeting. Next is the 2 on October 19th. There's one from 1:30 to 3 in the afternoon on Thursday, October 19th in the Finley Center. And then that evening from 6 to 7:30, there will be one that we have not yet determined exactly where it'll be located, but somewhere in the downtown area. There will then be another CAB meeting on Saturday, October 21st from 10 to 11:30 in the morning. And that'll take place at Montgomery High School. And we are working on one additional meeting in October, and those details, we'll provide you those details, and also those details will be on the website.
Thank you for that information.
Sure. So after we've had that series of the 2 public hearings here and the 5 community meetings, we will be preparing some proposed maps. We'll be working, the demographer will be preparing those maps based on the input that they receive, as well as, of course, all the legal criteria for mapping. We will then have 2 additional public hearings for input on the draft maps. One will be on November 1st. That's a Wednesday night, so it is a special meeting. And then the second will be on November 14th. And again, that's a Tuesday, so that's a regular meeting. And at those meetings, the council will consider both the boundaries of the districts, the mapping itself, and will also begin discussions of how to sequence the elections. So which districts will be up first for elections in November 2018. Again, there will be 3 districts that will be up in November 2018, and the other 4 2 years later in November 2020. There will be a final public hearing, and we would anticipate adoption of an ordinance on November 21st. That is also a Tuesday. And by law, we will be posting the maps at least 7 days before adoptions. So if there are changes in between, we will be making sure that those maps are posted at least 7 days before November 21st. And if there should be additional changes on November 21st, then we'll need to bring back the ordinance the following Tuesday, we'll be doing a special meeting November 27th. I'll mention that we may also be scheduling, in between all of those public hearings, we may be scheduling just a report item at the board to give you an update partway through as to how we're going and what the maps are beginning to look like before they get finalized, so that the council may have some chance to steer the direction before things get, drafts get finalized. So this is our recommendation, that we hold the first of the 5 public hearings tonight and take input. But before we do that, we have the demographer here, Shalise Tilton from NDC, National Demographics Corporation, and she's here, and I think this should go right into the slides.
I'm going to close it out.
Oh, we have to close it out. Sorry. And I will say that Ms. Tilton will be here at each of the 5 public public hearings, and will be taking the lead on most of the hearings going forward. She will be taking the lead in presenting the issues for your consideration in developing the district boundaries, and then in presenting the draft maps when those are prepared.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and council members. It's my pleasure to be here. As introduced, I'm Shalise Tilton. I'm representing NDC, which is your National Demographics Corporation. We've been in existence for 34 years and have successfully guided many, many clients, most recently since 2007 when the Modesto case was decided. We've handled about 100 cases of successfully converted over to districts. You're not alone in this CVRA challenge. Thought this may be interesting for you to see. We've had at least 157 school districts, 70 cities switch over to districts as a result of CVRA challenges. As Ms. Gallagher has pointed out, it's a costly endeavor to litigate these issues. Here it's just a snapshot of those who have settled, and Ms. Gallagher mentioned Palmdale and how Palmdale lost complete control of the process, and ultimately the judge threw out the November election, ordered a completely new election for June, accepted the plaintiff's map, which put 3 of the incumbents in 1 district, and ultimately it was not a win for Palmdale, clearly. We've already made the decision to proceed with adopting an ordinance, and the projected timeline has already been explained to you in detail. We will be shooting to have the draft maps. There is a factor that I clarified earlier today with the annexation. It appears that the annexation is going to proceed just from public feedback received. The city believes that the annexation will go forward and be effective November 1st. So we will need to work quickly on our end to try to get that data included with all of our maps and all of the information, the demographic spreadsheets that will be provided to you. So we will be shooting for October 15th, October 17th to have a few of the draft maps ready for you and some meaningful information. We did provide this, again, this does not include the Roseland annexed areas. Latinos are 29% of the total population, 17% of the citizen voting age population. When we prepare the draft maps, we will have complete demographic spreadsheet with each of the maps. And when you see it on here, you think, how is that possible to do? But it is possible. So each map will have basically 7 columns for the 7 districts, and we'll show each of the percentages of how that map depicts the percentages for those particular districts. The city has before we go into this, the city has decided to use participation, one of NDC's participation tools, which will allow citizens to be able to draw their own maps. They'll be able to go online and actually create a map and plug in the population units that will correspond to the district numbers that they've drawn, and it will generate for them the population of each of the districts, as well as the ethnic breakdown for each of those districts.
Ms. Tilton, would you just repeat the beginning of that statement again for clarity for the public?
Yeah, in fact, let me go in greater detail of what the participation tool would provide. That's helpful. So on the city's website that Ms. Gomez had just announced, and you can reach that through the city's homepage. So if you didn't follow all of that through the city's homepage, and I believe it's right on the homepage, it leads you that connection.
It is right on the homepage, so it's very easy to find.
We don't have time to do a full interactive kit where you can, or interactive tool, because of the 90-day time frame, we would be able to actually move lines and draw lines. So it's somewhat of a combination of a manually keyed in component, but I find that citizens, once they get used to how it works, really like it, because they're able to play around with the boundaries and see how they balance out as far as population and ethnicity. So what they will get is they will get a map with population units, which are larger than the census census blocks, but population units that are numbered 1 through 100, let's say. And they are able to draw the maps, and that map, and then they will be able to say, okay, district number 1 has maybe population units 1 through 50. So they would mark those as being in district number 1, and it would automatically populate for them, showing them how well they're doing on the total population balance and the percentage of Latinos in that district.
Okay, thank you.
If someone is interested in playing around with and kind of seeing how that all plays out, we did keep some old participation some websites that have completed the process. One is DrawBP, as in Buena Park, drawbp.org. And it's kind of, you can see how the kits work, what the demographic spreadsheet for the final adopted plan looks like. And actually, you could play around with the kit, even though that process has been completed some time ago.
Okay, great.
I didn't quite complete in detail what's in that kit, but it does include all of the demographic profile of the city. It includes maps with the key street names, key landmarks, the population units, as I mentioned, and the detailed demographic data for each population unit as well. So you can see, if you need to just add a little bit, a few more, say you need to add another couple hundred, you can see by population unit which units to grab to get your population up.
Okay.
It's difficult to explain, but once you do it, it's actually kind of fun to use. So the city will be establishing criteria for drawing the maps. The federal laws require equal population, that's total population, compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act, no racial gerrymandering. And then there are traditional criteria and that's the purpose of tonight, so that we can understand your communities of interest, understand what's important to this community, to those of you who live in the community, to those of you council members who have walked the streets of this community, you know your communities. Also, we need to draw boundaries that are compact as possible, contiguous where possible. I understand you have some non-contiguous boundaries as it is. Visible and boundaries, we respect the visible, both the natural and man-made boundaries. And respect the voters' wishes whenever possible for continuity of office. So we try to avoid head-to-head contests when possible. In many cases, that's not possible. This is a map, a color-coded map that depicts your heavily populated Latino areas. The light green and the you can see the color coding up to the right. So the light green, and I think that's showing as kind of an orange color. Your heavily populated Latino areas, and we're concentrated along the railroad corridor and the southeast area between Sebastopol Road and North Point Parkway.
Southwest.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, absolutely, southwest. We'll get that corrected. So it's in the southwest quadrant between Sebastopol Road and North Point Parkway. So to comply with the Voting Rights Act, we need to draw district boundaries that don't dilute the voting rights of those concentrated areas. So the first question, and the purpose of this public hearing, is to define what your communities of interest are. And as Ms. Gallagher said, they can include anything from school attendance zones, their public facilities, commercial interests, natural neighborhoods that identify with a certain park or are accessible to a certain park that might not be clear to me looking on a map, but are obviously clear to you. These things we need to know, people that identify themselves as a community that I would not know by looking at a map or looking at landmarks. It's really important for this process to be useful to when folks submit maps, and I want to point out that folks will have the option to submit maps either by using the public participation tool that I identified. They can just simply take the map that's provided on the toolkit or draw their own map and do rough districts. If they choose to go to the detail of, just out of curiosity, of deciding if their districts are balanced by population, they can go to that other spreadsheet and actually plug in the numbers that I mentioned earlier, but they need not go to that level. I noticed that we do have a couple of maps already submitted on your public input site. So to the best extent possible that we can take what's been submitted and put that into a workable map, we will do so and provide the data. There are some occasions when some of the maps don't have the correct number of districts, or so we're not able to work with that. But I don't want to discourage anyone from submitting a map because they're unable to maneuver the public participation toolkit. We always say you can do it on a cocktail napkin and we can figure it out. And then that map will be posted with the demographic detail. If you are submitting a map or anyone is submitting a map, it is important if you can put comments as to why you drew a particular district a certain way. That helps us if we need to adjust some of the population units just slightly, that we can respect your driving reason for having that map and that go down that particular line. To the extent possible, that helps. The community forums will also help with that input too.
And if I may just also add that people are also welcome to simply provide narrative comments. Doesn't have to be by drawing a map, but if they want to describe their community or voice certain preferences, they're welcome to do that either without submitting a particular map as well.
Thank you. Thank you for making that point. For example, we often hear that there's an interest in having the districts each share a component of the main commercial area or the main industrial area or the main entertainment area. So if those comments, please submit them because we can take that into consideration as well when we are preparing the draft maps.
And just for clarity, comments made at these public hearings will be recorded somehow and taken into account as we go through these drawings.
Mm-hmm. And I will, I believe, be able to attend most of your community forums and your public hearings, so I will also be taking personal notes when we can incorporating those into the drafts.
Good.
But that completes my presentation, and then my role right now is to listen and to hear what your communities of interest are so that we can get started on those draft maps for you.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Gallagher. Council, I know that we're going to have a lot of questions, but I'm going to ask us all to keep in mind that the purpose of the meeting tonight is to hold a public hearing, to hear what the public has to say, to hear what their desires are and what they see as their communities of interest. So if there are questions, preliminary questions now that are burning, let's ask them. But as far as diving deep into those questions, let's save that until after the public hearing, and maybe the public hearing will also inform our questions at that point as well. Mr. Rogers.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And with that in mind, I have a couple of process questions for you, Sue, just maybe to help frame some of the public comments as well. And I think, to me, the most important question coming into this meeting was what the interpretation for what we could do was going to be. And to me, this meeting and the next meeting, setting the parameters of what the districts could look like or what the election system would look like is the most important aspect of what we're doing. It seems to me, and we've received some correspondence from you, that the interpretation for moving into districts was, I think you described it as more of a surgical approach on the charter and not a hacksaw. So looking specifically at section 4 of the charter, where it says the legislative body of the city shall consist of 7 persons elected at large to be known as the council, and only striking the at large portion and not looking at our election as a system throughout the charter. Can you talk a little bit about your interpretation of why we can make that one little change versus looking at things such as the election of the mayor or the terms of the council members, making only that change and not looking at things in a broader context?
Sure, I'll try to keep my response very short and surgical as well. The reason that we're here is that we have a challenge to our at-large voting system, a challenge brought under the California Voting Rights Act. And the California Voting Rights Act, again, at issue is whether racially polarized voting has combined with an at-large system to impair the voting rights of a protected class. So it's very much focused on whether there is an at-large system or not. The courts have held that the California Voting Rights Act will preempt or in effect to negate any local provision that violates the terms of the act. Whether that provision is in the charter or whether that provision is an ordinance, it is going to be superseded by state law, which says we can't go that way. That means if indeed, at the end of the day, the evidence confirms that there is racially polarized voting that has impaired the voting rights of our Latino population, it's only that element, the at-large voting system, that becomes suspect under the Voting Rights Act and that is preempted by state law. All of the rest of the charter remains in full force and effect, and the only way to change any of those other elements of the charter would be by a vote of our citizens. So that is why for tonight and going forward through this process, we are only looking at shifting from the at-large to a district-based election. We are leaving in place the charter's provision. I shouldn't say we are. the citizens retain that power to say, as they have, that we have 7 council members, and that the mayor is selected by a vote of the 7 elected council members. So those 2 elements, the number of seats and the way selection of a mayor. I would also say the 4-year terms are set by the charter. So all of those elements of the charter are unaffected by the claims under the Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act doesn't care how many members are on your council, how you select your mayor, or how long your terms are. Those are not at issue.
So I appreciate that explanation. I think that that's really helpful for framing what the possibilities are in this discussion. Does that also mean then that the council is able to adopt an ordinance with 7 districts while also simultaneously putting some of those other charter changes that you mentioned on the ballot in June? So for example, does this preclude us from adopting an ordinance with 7 districts while also coming to the voters with an option in June of doing 6 districts with an at-large mayor? That would then override the ordinance should the voters pass it in June.
That is an option for the council. There is nothing that precludes you from proposing to the voters any other changes to the charter, but any other changes would require a vote of the electors.
And that would still satisfy the safe harbor provision?
Yes. If the council adopts an ordinance that sets in place the 7 districts by the end of November or near the end of November, then you remain within the safe harbor. And what takes place after that is up to you and of course the voters if you decide to place something on the ballot after that. But there's nothing in this process that precludes further actions after November.
What I will just say to that is the staff assignment is based upon, and to be able to deliver within the 90 days is based upon the presentation that the city attorney has made focusing on one issue. If we expand the coursework to include other substantive explorations at the same time we're trying to do the central exploration, we won't have the ability to engage in that. So we would have to request that we get through this process, and then if the council wished to engage in a further process, understand what that further process would be. Because I need to remind council, we are in a 90-day window and we're trying to answer some very substantive questions that are related to your charter, that are related to this provision. So I'm not saying we can't engage in that conversation. I do have some concerns about what we're able to deal with in the issues we're tackling in front of us right now. So I just want to put that out there, that the intent, the worker proposal in front of you is about addressing, as the city attorney said, the issue that's under discussion and achieving an answer for you to stay within your safe harbor provision.
Right. Mr. McGlynn, I don't think any of us are under any impression that adding work is not going to make this more of a challenge. I just wanted to make sure that it was clear that while it seems very black and white in the way that we're discussing this aspect, that we do understand that there are other suggestions out there of what our election system should look like. My last comment before we go to the public comment is that I would certainly hope that before we draft any maps, we also articulate to the public a very clear process for how we are going to determine which districts are up for election and what the process of transition is going to be. I think that we need to have that in place before we have any maps to look at so that it's very clear to everybody.
And just to follow up on your comments, Mr. McGlynn, we are asking the public for their input here, and I know that I've heard from members of the public various iterations of what we should have for our election system. Are we saying that we are not going to entertain suggestions of anything less than 7 districts? will the tool only accept a division of 7 districts, for instance?
In order to get to the end of this process by the end of November, we have some different options of how we can set it up, but I would urge us to focus on the 7 districts. Certainly, we could take comments. I don't know, I'd have to defer to the demographer. If we receive comments and keep them in kind of a separate file as to other options going forward, I don't know any reason we can't do that. I wholeheartedly agree with Mr. McGlynn that any of those considerations are going to have to take place after we're completed this process within the safe harbor by the end of November. Of course, it would always be an option for the council to decide not to stay within the safe harbor, but you would then risk all the risks that you've seen by getting outside of the safe harbor. So assuming we want to stay in the safe harbor, I would urge that we focus in on the 7 districts at this point. Comments that are received, and if at the end of that process the council wishes to direct us to look at options and bring back something for a later election, we can certainly do that. If we were looking at a June election, our deadline for having something in place would be early March. So that's, again, a very tight time frame. You could bring something back at a later date as well. So all of those options are still on the table, but again, I'll defer to the demographer in terms of what input they can receive and effectively and efficiently process. But perhaps there's also some, in effect, I think there's a new term rather than parking lot, but where those other comments could go as to a broader overhaul. I would note too that there is a process by which the city does charter review periodically, and that would be another opportunity to look at those broader election questions as well.
Do you have anything to add to that, Ms. Tilton, at this point?
To answer your question, we do have the ability to put up different kits. So say we could put up a 7-district kit, we could put up a 5-district kit, a 6-district kit with a direct elected mayor. We could do that. And we've done that for jurisdictions that are either their charter is silent or they're a general law city. Your charter is not silent, so you're adding another level of complication to that.
Understood. Okay, I'm sure that the council will have some further comments and questions about this. Do you want to do that now?
If I may.
Go ahead, Ms. Combs.
So I wanted to, we're 3 years from 2020. I just wanted to clarify, we will have to redraw our maps at the census no matter what. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes. Okay, and we also, I think, have a charter provision that we have a charter review committee meet every so often.
That's correct.
And so by around 2020, it's likely we would have a charter review commission. Somewhere in there?
Somewhere in there. I don't know the exact dates.
Okay, so it might make sense not to rush something quickly into March, but to have a considered conversation within the community for other charter changes. I'm just throwing that out there because it's so close within 3 years to do something in 2020.
And I just want to add that what I am looking for, because the council member brought it up, is clarity. I wanted to make sure the council understood what the assignment was, what's been negotiated with the demographer. If there is different approaches here, we will try to adapt to that approach, but we got to keep in mind that there's a safe harbor and there's safe harbor provision, and that we've done this under the auspices of preserving a November 7th meeting to do other work concurrently. We really need to understand if there's an additional assignment here so that we can evaluate the ramifications of that assignment. I want to just make sure that I'm uncomfortable with negotiation happening at the dais, but I wanted to make it clear what the assignment was and what you were receiving back from the city attorney's office, because I didn't want it to be an open-ended question going into next week's public hearing. If what you're entertaining right now is the very narrow work that the city attorney has put forward, and unfortunately that's sort of the space we end up in a 90-day allotment, is how we get into these conversations and what we're trying to answer. Staff's not saying we can't, we're saying we'd have to reorganize around some of those questions, and that does start to affect the timetable and deliverable, but we still have to answer that basic question in the 90 days.
Okay, and I think we'll get some input from the public tonight that may help us in our guidance to you later on in the meeting. Mr. Schwedhelm.
So I just want to clarify, so in your slides 4 and 5, unfortunately litigation is somewhat of a driver in exposure to litigation. So you talked about the 4 essential elements, and I know previously in public meetings we've heard 2 of them have been established. My question is, will the demographer be providing additional information about the last 2? You know, I know the council is giving unanimous direction that we think we're going in the right direction, but again, that exposure to litigation, have we proved those 2 of those other 4 essential elements as identified on slide 5?
We are in the process of those studies, and we will be bringing those back to you.
And where, with the timeline that you provided to us, where would that information fit in with our time frame?
Right. I anticipate that we will have that information within the next couple of weeks, and I would anticipate that we would be bringing that to you certainly before November 1st, when you're first considering the maps, and I would hope sooner than that. I can't give you the date right now, but I would say within the next couple of weeks we should have that data for you.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Combs.
Thank you. But before the public comments, I wanted to clarify some things that are, I believe it is the NDC slide 7, if you can pull that up. Thank you. I just want to clarify some things so that when the public comments, we understand what communities of interest are, because I'm really interested in hearing from folks about their communities of interest. Can other minority groups be considered a community of interest, or are we only allowed to look at Latino because of the nature of the lawsuit?
Not only just minority groups, ethnic groups, groups that identify as a community, any community of interest.
So income or could be
age, education.
Okay, renters and homeowners?
All of that can be taken into consideration.
Consideration of historic districts?
Mm-hmm.
Crossing 101 or Highway 12, is that okay, or does that cause a barrier? I mean, those are major intersections, but it might be that a group on one side of Highway 12 would want to be affiliated with a group on the other side of Highway 12.
Right, and sometimes it's unavoidable. And sometimes even though you have a freeway, even though you have a freeway, there are still communities that identify.
Contiguous on both sides of a park, like the people on one side of Annandale Park and the people on the other side of Annandale Park might both
Right, as long as the
more
boundary is contiguous. So you can't have this section and then skip in another section. You have to be able to walk.
Okay, so if the park is not owned by the city, is that contiguous or not contiguous?
Well, we would go down the middle of the street that borders the park. You would make it contiguous.
Okay. You mentioned 3 open seats. Do those have to be the 3 seats that have electeds now in those districts, or could, for example, the Southwest, which has not had a district, be one of the 3 seats that we consider?
Yes, let me clarify, because what you'll be deciding in terms of sequence is what 3 districts will have their elections first. You currently, each of you has been elected at large. None of you represent a district. So this is not, in choosing this sequence, it is not about the people that are filling the seats. It's about the seats represent, who do those seats represent? We will have 4 seats that are still representing the city at large. We will have 3 seats that are representing particular districts. So, how you decide which 3 districts will be first, I don't have those criteria for you tonight, but that will be part of our presentation going forward, giving you some options of how to make that determination.
Thank you. If I may say so, first, thank you very much for that. It clarifies a lot. I am really interested in hearing public comment on communities of interest, neighborhoods on this list. So I just want to let the public know this is an area that I am particularly interested in. I hope your comments include that, although of course you are free to comment in any way you want. Thank you.
All right. This is a public hearing, and we do encourage you to participate, and we are interested in all of these questions. Before we get started, I just want to say that I'm particularly interested in hearing what the desires of the public are about the number of districts, whether we're able to do that through this process or not. I still would encourage you, if you have strong opinions about whether we should have 5 or 7 or 6 or 4, whether we should have a mayor who's selected by the council, a mayor who's elected by the city at large, and also the question of which 3 districts and how we should decide what 3 districts are up next year would be interesting to me too. As Councilmember Combs said, the floor is open, so comment on what you like, but those are items of interest for me. I'm going to open the public hearing. If you want to speak, you can fill out a card. So we have it up here. You don't have to fill out a card, but I'll call the cards first. Gregory Fearon will be first, followed by Jan Edwards.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. I sent you something today, and I'm not going to read it. It's my hope to inspire you to be bold and to take this very seriously, as I know all of you are. What I want to do is spend the time I have trying to help the audience and everybody in the city know how to find out what the comments are. Because as I was sitting up there, I went on your website and basically found that if you go to the city's website and you go to the government or departments and you go to city clerk, on the city clerk's webpage is a election information link, which then has a sub-navigation bar that goes to district-based elections, which then if you click, you get to, finally, a public input. If you click on that, you get the input you've received so far, including mine 3 weeks ago and several others that have come in. I want you to put everybody's input as quickly as you can onto that website so all of us can look at it and see what everyone's saying. I'd love to have you put the video on there of tonight and all future times. We all need to hear each other, and we can't all come down and we can't all navigate through the system. Make the system as easy as possible. Like I said, it's 6 different clicks to get there. Try to make it as far up in the website as possible so people can really get to it. But help us hear each other. Help us read what each other's putting in. That will stimulate ideas. That will give us all a chance to, hey, they said that we will share with each other. We will build that input you need about what a neighborhood is, what a community of interest is, and how to tell you what it is we want. I want to thank the city attorney for raising the most important question tonight, which is, who is we? It's not them, it's not even me, it's you guys. It's how we elect you. And that's what's in the balance tonight and for the next month. So please help us learn what each other's saying, help us build a consensus, and give you the best advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Jan Edwards should be followed by Ann Seeley. Jan here? Ann Seeley. And Ann will be followed by Marion Aird.
Good evening, Mayor Corsi and council members. Since I broke my leg last January, I walk up and down stairs very carefully.
Good idea.
With great respect. I'm really glad that the hearings are structured as they are, with these first two intended for comment prior to any maps being drawn. About district elections, I have just one request. That is that the division of the city's voters be into 7 new districts. When district elections have been discussed in the past, and they sure have for about 20 years, some commentators have suggested bridging the old and new systems by creating a hybrid system in which, for instance, the most popular has been 4 districts with 3 at-large, 3 council members still elected at large. This suggestion to me has always been counterproductive. That makes a council of unequal status, and with some claiming support from the whole city-wide voters and some from representing individual districts. Another option that some have supported is 6 districts with an elected mayor who makes up the 7th council member. Even though there are many variations within the elected mayor system, all include a mayor with greater power than I see as being healthy for the city of Santa Rosa. The city manager system we have separates the political from the administrative powers, and I think that's appropriate for us. I look forward to further discussions on this. You'll be hearing a lot more.
Thank you, Ms. Seeley. Marion Aird. It should be followed by Robin Rose.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. First, I would like to thank Attorney Gallagher and Ms. Tilton for their wonderful presentations. I'd like to add some of my personal experience to this input session. I lived in San Francisco until the year 2001. While I lived there, the city switched from citywide to district elections. At that time, I was given the opportunity to participate in the structuring of the different districts. It's a very difficult job. It's a very important job, and take it very, very seriously, and I appreciate that we have this opportunity for input. One of the big shocks to me when I registered to vote in Sonoma County was to learn that the northwest quadrant of the city that I live in has very rarely, if ever, been represented by a member of the city council. I'm sure this is driven by economic circumstances. It just costs a lot of money to run for public office, and that particular community does not have that kind of money available on that scale. Secondly, I learned that my supervisorial district my participation in it consisted of a tiny dog leg from the 4th district, and I felt completely cut off from opportunities to have meetings with and understandings with the rest of the people in my supervisorial district. As regards the number of districts and the setup, my personal preference, is something that should be addressed after the results of the 2020 census come out. I think the city warrants 5 districts, no more. Very simple, central district for downtown and 4 quadrants represented. Thank you again. Keep on with your good work.
Thank you. Robin Rose, followed by Bob Hanson.
Thank you. I didn't come with any prepared remarks, but looking at Mr. Shankman's letter, where he talks about the education project alleges the racially polarized voting within the city, I don't see that. I am confused by that. I live on the far west boundary of Santa Rosa. Ernesto is not on the city council because he is Hispanic. I don't believe that for one moment. I don't believe where I live in District 5 that Ephraim Carrillo was elected by anybody other than home-owning white folks. I don't see this polarization that he's talking about. I also remember when my husband and I moved here in 2003 that I was reading the Press Democrat, and the boundary, that the quadrants were defined by the creek. And I believe that I live in Southwest. It's not Highway 12. When I shop, when I go places, my post office is on Lombardy and Sebastopol Road. That's my part of Santa Rosa. I would find it strange to think I welcome Roseland into the city of Santa Rosa, and I look forward to more Hispanic representation, but I don't like the idea that this man in Malibu, the whitest, richest enclave in the state of California, is bringing this action against our city. And if I didn't read the Press Democrat, I wouldn't have realized that in 2008 there was an article that Forestville was the Republican, that's where Republicans lived and voted in a block, as in not for Obama in 2008. But that the city as a whole, I guess Sonoma County voted 90% Democrat. So I just don't see, I understand acting quickly to avoid a large legal fee, and I can tell from the prior comments that people feel that they haven't been represented. I don't see that from your votes. And I would only just say that the Voting Rights Act doesn't include by sex. If somebody were to observe our city council, they would say, only Julie? Huh? You know, it's very strange. So is that the next thing, that half the seated council members will be women? So I wish you well, and please consider the creek, the natural boundaries, as a way to get inclusiveness. If you're going to do quadrants or whatever, I like the idea, by the way, of having, this is the center of the city. This is the Fielding Creek. Okay. So
Thank you.
make this.
Bob Hanson, and he'll be followed by Elaine Holtz.
Good evening, everybody. Our citizens' voting rights are very simple. One registered voter, one vote. 2 years ago, I had a problem. I was directed by City Council to my district supervisor, Mrs. Combs. We sat down, had a cup of coffee, discussed the problem, and settled it. 2 weeks ago, I proposed opening up this park. And I called all of our supervisors. They all responded. And in our discussion, I got the information I needed. We have a system that works. One registered voter, one vote. Why we're listening to this lawyer who's coming into our city dictating time frame and basically using extortion to get what he wants. We either pay him $30,000 now or $3 million after litigation, is submitting to extortion. I hope we do not pay this man a dime. I relate this to the lawyer who went up and down our state, suing mom and pop stores for disability infractions, made millions. Here we have another lawyer who's figured out a way to tap into every general fund from Crescent City to San Diego. What we have in this city works. I can talk to my supervisors. I can get answers from my supervisors. If you pay this man a dime, I will be offended. I've watched our voting rights through the course of the last 10 years as a precinct inspector. 10 years ago, if I issued half a dozen provisional ballots. It was exceptional. The last federal election, 1/4 of the ballots I issued were provisional, where it was against the law for me to verify name and address of the person coming into my precinct. That's wrong. That's putting too much pressure on registrar voters who are being pressured to release the results of the election within 24 hours, to verify and validate 1/4 of the ballots issued within 24 hours. They don't have the time or the facility to verify 1/4 of the ballots issued. Our voting rights are being manipulated and diluted by our state government to the point that anybody who walks into a precinct on election day, I issue a ballot to. Don't submit to this lawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Elaine Holtz. Elaine will be followed by Bonnie Hogue.
Hello, my name is Elaine Holtz, about 35-year resident here at Santa Rosa, and definitely a seasoned person when it comes to district elections. I can't tell you how many doors I knocked on, how many people I talked to about the importance of district elections and why it's valuable. And that one sign came up, one sign, your vote won't count, and that lost the whole election. I mean, it was amazing to me. At that time, I found out that our city is run by a political group. There's a group of people that actually make decisions, that have more power than I as a citizen have. And they have more money and they have more influence. And so I'm very concerned when I read defining community of interest. I want to find out how we're going to find the community of interest. Who are the people that are going to meet with that you're going to decide how the division is going to happen? That's the first thing. And then does the community of interest want to be united in one district or to be divided? Who's going to make that decision? Is it just all of you, or how are you going to get input? I mean, we have 2 meetings. I have 3 minutes. It's not a phone call, it's not a discussion. I have 3 minutes to say blah, 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 blah. I want more than 3 minutes. I want to have input in this. We worked very, very hard to get it in the ballot. We worked very hard trying to get people to understand what it was. People did understand, but at the end, people got scared. And so it's just very interesting to me. I mean, I am very concerned about input, let's put it that way. And I hope that my neighborhood, for example, I have a very mixed bag neighborhood. I mean, we have 17 languages in our neighborhood. How is that going to be determined as far as the district goes? And one last question, or one last thought I have, is I kind of go along with Marion. 7 districts seems to be pretty heavy. And I hope that maybe at some point we decide maybe on 5. And also, I really support the idea, not that you're not doing a great job, Mayor Corsi, because we were just complimenting you, actually how good of a job you are doing. But I really am in favor of electing the mayor, because I want to know who is running my city council. Not just someone, maybe I didn't vote for that person, but at least I have a vote now, and I can have some sort of sense of what is the word, buy-in. And I have to say this one last thing. I am so happy that this is happening. I am so sorry that it had to happen by being forced with a lawsuit when we in Santa Rosa at one time, if we would have had proper information, could have won. Thank you.
Thank you. Bonnie Hogue, and she'll be followed by Brian Ling.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. I don't have a lot of prepared remarks. I just want to share a couple of things. And I believe I sent you all an email when this first came up expressing my preference for at-large elections, so you all know where I stand on that. I have a lot of questions, and I understand this is not a question and answer session, and that those questions might get answered on the 19th at a separate meeting. So I'll try to hold off for that. I guess a couple of things that I wanted to say is somebody told me on the phone today that the population of Santa Rosa is at about 180,000. If you have 7 districts, you have 25,700 and something people. if you have an 80% participation rate in voting, which I think I saw on a slide, you have 20,000 people in a district that are participating. I think I'm leaning towards something less than 7 districts. The other thing I want to say is I'm a 64-year resident of Santa Rosa, and I was born and raised here. And it's hard for me to think of the city in terms of dividing into areas of common interest. Because I see, I've lived in different parts of town, and I go through different parts of town, and to me it's town. I understand kind of what you're trying to get at with representation, and I appreciate that. I think it'd be interesting to see some of the maps displayed in terms of socioeconomics, in terms of income levels, in terms of education levels. One of my big fears about this process is that you try to provide opportunities for one group of people to have a greater say, and you actually shift the axis of power a little towards other individuals. I don't know, I guess we'll find out. And yeah, so that's all, and thanks for the opportunities to participate. I think the map drawing tool sounds very cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hogue. Brian Ling, and he'll be followed by Tracy Weizenberg.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Brian Ling, Sonoma County Alliance. Just one comment tonight, and that's really an economic development comment. We don't have a lot of input at this point yet on how the lines are drawn or some of these communities or the mayor's subject or anything else. But economic development and downtown Santa Rosa corridor. The single best opportunity, I look at us ahead 5, 10, 20 years from now for economic development growth is really breathing some life into our downtown. And what we've done the last couple of years is a heck of a great start. We've invested a lot of time and heartache and money. A few businesses lost their businesses over the time. And it's very important that this process, we do the best job we can anticipating the future of downtown. And I guess I'm saying I don't think it's one district. I don't know that it's 7 districts that represent downtown, but it's probably certainly more than 2. I don't know how you carve it up. The more you carve it, sometimes it gets splintered. But I really hope we give a lot of thought on these maps to protect downtown as best as possible. Maybe 3 or 4 different districts can touch it. I don't have a magic number, but I think it's very important to keep investing in what we've already invested in. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy Weizenberg, followed by Isabel Lopez.
Good evening, Mayor Corsi, members of the City Council, and Tracy Weizenberg with the Santa Rosa Metro Chamber. I have very similar comments to Brian Ling. At this point, just the one issue for the Chamber would be with the effort put out by this council, by city staff, and downtown business owners, property owners, and the Chamber. There's great momentum downtown, so I would have to say we'd be very interested in seeing multiple districts representing and invested in downtown. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Isabel Lopez.
Hello, I'm Isabel Lopez, and I'm here just to provide some recommendations on this subject. So definitely looking into income levels, so shared demographics, education, so that we can certainly allocate more resources to where they're really needed. And I think that's certainly a way of doing that. I definitely don't think we should really focus on worrying so much on business, because this is our education. So I think that should definitely be like towards the last of anyone's worries at this point. And definitely like getting those resources where they're needed. So thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Lopez. That's all the cards I have. You don't need to fill out a card to speak to us tonight. If anyone else would like to comment, please come forward. Mr. Price.
Terry Price, 35 years, resident of Santa Rosa. On the conversation regarding the elected mayor, strong mayor, weak mayor, was dealt with extensively in the last charter review process, which is at the committee I served on. We spent many hours going over the issue, including bringing in a panel of politicos who were from cities that had different configurations. And the conclusion, and it wasn't close really, because there was some divisive issues, this was not one, that we did not recommend a elected mayor. So I like the suggestion that was brought up previously of having the charter review process instigated. It doesn't have to be every 10 years. It could be sooner than that, to deal with the weighty issues of elected mayor, especially if it's going to be weak or strong, because that would mean, strong mayor would mean pretty much the elimination of your city manager, for example. So, so I think it needs quite a bit of discussion and review, and I think the charter review process is the way to go. And you can go back and look at what we talked about at the last charter to kind of get a sense of what direction that discussion went in.
Thank you. Anyone else? See, there we go. Ms. Benuelos.
Good afternoon, Mayor Corsi and members of the council. I wasn't going to speak today, but I thought I probably should. I want to commend you, the council, as well as the city attorney and the manager and the demographer for all of this work. The way that I view this is that it is really a celebration of voting rights and a celebration of helping people who are disenfranchised be a part of the process. So that's the way that I view it. I hope that you do. It's a positive thing. I have lived here in Santa Rosa since 1983. I'm not born here, but I've been here a long time. And I've seen it really change and grow. And I know very well how people of color in particular many feel disenfranchised. So there's no question about that, even when people don't consciously try to do that. So what I would like is for the public to understand that this is not about shifting power. It's really about sharing it, right? I mean, it's about all of us being a part of the process. So I just wanted to touch on that. I'm really looking forward to using the tool. We've been drawing maps like crazy, but not with the access to the number of voters and ethnicity and all that information. So I'm really anxious to use the tool and maybe come back with some proposals at the next meeting. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity and tell you this is wonderful and you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on down, Mr. McHugh.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I just have a question in terms of how you will be elected once this is done. Will it continue to be by plurality, or will there be a primary and then a general election? And perhaps your city attorney can answer that question. That's what my interest is.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. Ms. Gallagher, we're having a series of public hearings. Do I close this public hearing? Do we leave it open? How does that work?
I would go ahead and close this public hearing. We are having 5 separate public hearings.
Okay. All right. I'm closing this public hearing. Bring it back to the council. Questions? Mr. Tibbetts, haven't heard from you yet.
I think actually I wanted to follow up on the question asked by a member of the public, Mr. McHugh, versus primary versus plurality. I don't believe the charter stipulates, will we have the opportunity to choose about that system?
Councilmember, I have not actually considered that, but again, my analysis is the only thing that we're looking at in this process is the shift from at-large to district. We're not addressing other elements of the election system. I would have to look at what jurisdiction the council would have if indeed the charter is silent on that issue, what authority the council might have to make that change. And I'm happy to bring that answer back next week.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Other questions, council? Mr. Rogers.
Well, thank you, and that certainly is one of the questions that I had as well, was about whether anything in the charter precluded a primary, or if that'd be part of the discussion. I did want to bring up in section 11 of the city charter, subsection A, it says the council shall undertake all reasonable methods to ensure that its appointments to boards, commissions, and committees reflect Santa Rosa's diversity, including geographic and ethnic diversity. So part of the conversation for me that we have not had, and maybe this is potential cleanup, whether through charter review after the fact, is what will happen with our board appointees as well if they go to districts. Will individual council members then be required to appoint from within their district? Obviously, we have the Community Advisory Board that I think would be an easy transition, but I do think that that needs to be a part of the conversation as well with the Planning Commission and the Board of Public Utilities. So I did want to just put that question out there, and I'm not expecting an answer right now.
Other questions? I have a few questions. First of all, we had quite a bit of discussion about this, what we're talking about here as far as the Voting Rights Act and what racially polarized voting means. We haven't talked about what it doesn't mean. And my understanding of the law is that there doesn't need to be any intent on the part of the city or of the voters to deny anyone their rights or to deny anyone participation. So could you talk a little bit about what it does mean and what it doesn't mean?
Sure, and Mr. Mayor, you are exactly right. The California Voting Rights Act simply looks at the math, really, the voting records and whether those, the voting statistics reflect that in our case, the Latino population tends to vote for certain candidates and certain issues that is different than the candidates and issues that are selected by the non-Latino voters. So it is really a statistical analysis. It does not look at whether there is any intentional intent to discriminate. It does not look at any racial animus. That being said, so again, that initial determination of racially polarized voting is based on voting records alone. That being said, in court, if we were in court to defend the lawsuit, other evidence could come in as well. The evidence of the voting history is a primary evidence for a Voting Rights Act violation, but a court could also take into account history of discrimination, any voting systems that might, whether intended or not intended, might suppress minority votes, systems that might make it more difficult for members of a minority community to gain access to funds or to other resources for elections. So those elements can come into the lawsuit, but you are exactly right that the California Voting Rights Act does not depend upon any finding of racial animus or any finding of discrimination. It really, again, the primary focus is on the voting history and the demographics of the community.
We're talking about a letter that accuses or alleges that the city has impaired the voting rights of a protected class.
Yes.
how exactly is that determined?
When we're looking at it for purposes of, again, I think I'll separate out what we as staff have been looking at in terms of evaluating the risks in the litigation versus what, at the end of the day, might be considered by a court. We have really focused on simply the voting records in the community. So what our demographer is looking at is what have been the results in a number of different elections. I think so far we've looked at 5. I think we're going to look at another 3 elections. These are both statewide elections and local elections. Looking at the results of those and how the results among the Latino population, what the results are compared to results in the non-Latino population. These analyses are fairly sophisticated, statistical methods that are really beyond my full understanding at this point. But those are what we're looking at. And then we're looking at, so what is the result of that? So if there's a difference in the patterns of voting among the Latino population and the non-Latino population, has the result been that the non-Latino population, because it's the majority of the population, whether that has had the practical effect of overriding the votes of the Latino population? We're not looking at whether it's intended to suppress that vote or whether there's any racial motivation there or racial discrimination. From staff's perspective, that's what we're looking at, is really the numbers and statistics. Again, if we get into court, the court will look at evidence broader than that, and can look at other indicia of racial discrimination in the community. But for our purposes, we're not going there.
So we're looking at the data with the legal requirements in mind. Once that study is complete, it will be shared with the public, and that will be sometime before November 1st, I think you said.
That's what we are anticipating and hoping. Yes.
All right. And who's doing that study?
We have an independent demographer doing that study.
All right. As subject matter expert in the field. Thank you. Couple of questions that were brought up by the public. Is a hybrid system okay under this law? Say, have 4 districts and 3 at-large members?
I don't believe so. I have done some research, but have not done comprehensive research, and I don't know if our demographer may be able to, if Ms. Tilson may be able to speak to that as well. But it is, the cases that I have looked at have suggested that really what we're looking at is a full district or a district. So we're looking at the full district under the California Voting Rights Act. The other element that comes into this conversation is we are moving forward under a government code provision 34866 or 688. I'd have to look at my
There's a couple of
cheat sheet.
in there, I know.
But looking at a particular code provision, state statute that allows a council to shift from an at-large voting system to a district-based election system by ordinance rather than by requiring a vote of the electorate for purposes of a transition to either a fully a district-based election, in other words, 7 districts, or a district-based election with a single at-large mayor. So we have focused, because we're relying on that statute, and the statute is limited to those 2 options, those are the only 2 options that the council, those are the only 2 options for the council. And then given our charter provision, which expressly provides how a mayor is going to be selected, and is not by at-large election, it is by selection by the council members themselves, that takes that option off the table. So when you piece together the statutory provision and our charter, the option that's before you is a full district-based election. And it looks like Ms. Tilson has some addition.
Please.
Yeah, a fully at-large system is the only safe harbor from a CVRA lawsuit. So blended systems do not work. Blended systems, cumulative voting, instant runoff voting from districts where you reside in a district but are voted down at large, or combination of any of these are all defined under the California voting rights systems as at large, and at large is what is the validity of at large is being suspect. So it needs to be, I'm sorry, I misspoke when I first said the by district is the only safe harbor.
All right.
It's not a blended system.
Thank you. There was a statement about weak mayor and strong mayor. Does an elected mayor necessarily mean a strong mayor and a system that does not have a city manager?
You mean a system that does have a city manager?
The statement was that if you have a strong mayor, the city manager doesn't stick around. Or he may choose that, but then we would not have a city manager in that case.
It does not mean that you would not have a city manager, but it may mean your city manager may leave. But also, to your question, having an elected mayor does not necessarily mean that you have a strong mayor.
A strong mayor, which is a term of art for the powers of a mayor. You could have an elected mayor that is as weak as the mayor is currently.
There are two very distinct definitions. So most who have a directly elected mayor in the state of California are not strong mayor.
Thank you.
They have equal vote as the remaining council members.
Question came up, actually a thought came up about communities of interest. We have a scorecard that's been produced by our violence prevention program that actually has taken a look at communities of interest and communities of similarity throughout the city. We have communities of need, but specific needs. Can that be used to help us draw these maps?
Certainly.
And finally, the question of who decides. I think that I'm pretty clear on that this is in the council's lap to make these decisions about what the lines are. We are asking the community for help. That's what these hearings are about. We're going to be doing this in public in a very transparent way. It's interesting that the subject of gerrymandering is a high-profile subject right now. The Supreme Court is taking it up in their new session. I was interested to hear today that the case that's before the Supreme Court, the district lines were drawn in secret. They were done behind closed doors by the people that those lines affect. We are in a position of drawing lines that are going to be affecting us, but we are doing it in the most transparent way that we know how to do. And we are sincerely asking the public to weigh in on this and provide us with your input, with your thoughts, with your desires for what this city is going to be looking like in our elections going forward. So we are going to decide at what point, if ever, do people get to know where we live and what our interest is based very specifically on that geography. And before I forget, I just want to point out that we do have a member of the council who lives in Northwest Santa Rosa, Mr. Sweat.
Yes, we have discussed that, and in fact, we discussed that this afternoon as well. We intentionally have not put that out for this public hearing, probably will not for the next, but certainly as we start moving towards drawing the maps, that information, I should preface this with, that information is all public.
Yes.
So we can bring that forward to you at any time and to the public. And we do intend to include that in our presentation, certainly by the time that we are drafting maps, because it may very well be a matter of the public's interest in terms of where you each live and how that may affect your tenure on the council. So yes, that information will be part of the materials that we're bringing forward. Again, I was thinking that we'd probably be bringing that forward, not next week, but the next time we're in front of you, but we'd be happy to bring that next week if that seems to be of interest to the community. Again, we recognize that it will be of interest to your constituents. So.
I think you're right about that, and just as long as before we start drawing maps, as long as we have our locations on those maps, and I don't know how this can be transparent without including that information, so thank you for that. Councilor, are there any concluding or further questions? Go ahead, Mr. Twedhelm.
It's going to be in the form of a question, but then there'd be a request if the answer is not what I'm hoping it could be. You touched base on the Violence Prevention Partnership, and we do have, areas of the city that are opportunities for additional investments. Even when we talk about the road maps, we can see with the PCIs across the city. Is there an opportunity with this participation tool to actually have those maps so we can overlay? Because I know other community members have talked about, okay, what are the school district boundaries? Just as an interest point. And the other one, too, that I'd be interested in is the portrait of Sonoma County, and lay that map, which has, okay, where are some areas that are in greater need than others? So would there be a series of overlay maps that would be available as we're doing the participation tool that you said?
In many cases, yes. Not in all cases, but so we would definitely need to get that list of what you're desiring to have. Sometimes the school districts get so complicated, it's very difficult to create a map and an overlay, but you can have definitely different layers of overlay, and an overlay of where the council members reside, at least the census tract, not the exact pinpointed area. You can have all those different various types, including what you are mentioning. So definitely we can get that feedback from you today. I heard school districts and county.
And so how would a member of the public be able to get that information to you? And again, I would imagine, not knowing how technologically you're able to do it, but you could have a draft number of overlay maps that you could potentially insert public buildings, because I know we've had some reports from city staff about infrastructure needs of the city. And you just check and just see whatever boundary you come up with. Let me see what other ways that some of those interests might be covered or communities be covered.
And in addition to having those overlays, which we can, and to answer your question, the public can simply submit notations on the maps that they submit, or if they just want to submit an email just requesting, if they see it overlaid, to see if we're able to provide it. Also with the interactive maps that you'll be able to convert from a street view where you see detailed street names, or you'll be able to do satellite image. So you'll be able to draw the districts and see those satellite images of where the parks are. You know the city, you'll be able to identify where your fire stations are, that type of thing. So that's a real helpful tool as well. You can identify the schools very easily, oftentimes by those satellite districts, and just knowing you know your city. So that will be helpful interaction. You can create you can look at different views as the maps get created with the boundaries overlaid on top. And with the various overlays you can pile on. School districts sometimes, because you'll have many cities that will have, some cities have a dozen school district overlays. So,
I think we're 5 or 6 different school districts within our boundaries. But, and when would that be live, where people can actually start utilizing these tools?
I'm sorry? the mapping tool live. So we will not, for this process, because we only have 90 days, will not be able to actually do the fully interactive one where you can move the lines yourself. But as soon as maps are submitted, NDC will get those online as soon as possible. So say you submit, on the back of a cocktail napkin, a map, we will draw it out and have it online as soon as our technicians are able to get it done. And depending on unfortunately, because many cities are receiving these demand letters and are within this 45 and 90-day time frame, we are crunched, but we have an amazing team that gets these turned around very quickly for you. So we're hoping to have the draft maps in place that would have the overlays and be able to at least look at the satellite views. We may not necessarily have those, the county district overlays that you mentioned. That may be easy, but the school district ones, we'd have to look in to see what we could do on that. But we would at least have we're hoping by the 19th, is it the 17th? That's what we're going to push forward, to have the 17th have some of those draft maps that will have those overlays.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to say I was a little bit surprised on one of your slides to see a potential community of interest as respect for voters' wishes and continuity in office. That's a much more flowery way of putting that than I would. So I just wanted to make it clear that one of the communities of interest that I am not interested in seeing is where the council members reside. Ultimately, this is not about us, and that conversation has a shelf life of less than 2 years. I'm looking at this from the perspective of what's it going to look like in 20 and 30 years when I'm voting on who I want to represent me in the district that I'm residing in as a neighbor. So I just wanted to make sure that we're very clear on that. To that end, I also still have the same question that I hope we will answer next week on how we will transition and how we will choose which districts are up for election. And while that will obviously have an impact on those of us who are sitting up here, I'm actually looking at it in that 20 and 30 year time frame, because we'll be baking in which districts will be in a low turnout election versus which districts will be in a high turnout election. I think it'll have a significant impact on those districts and on what their representation looks like. Outside of that, I do want to thank those of you who have shown up tonight to give input. Go home and talk to people, your neighbors. I'd like to see 10 times as many people weighing in at our meeting next week. So thank you.
So can I just follow up on the council member's request? The city attorney and I will consult over possible solutions, but some of those solutions are embedded in the mapping exercise itself. So I want to make it really clear, council can elect to do certain things, I think, in advance of maps, but some things that you may want to entertain will not be present until we actually get into a mapping exercise. So happy to take that under advisement, but I'm not sure, we may need a direction from council on how they want to approach that if you want to make a decision next week, happy to have you make a decision about a general approach. But until we actually see maps, some of those, until we know where the districts are, I'm not sure how we might answer those questions. So we'll take that under advisement. I just wanted to make sure that it's clear that some decisions might be interrelated to where districts are designated.
And that's fine. I want us to agree on a process, so that there's a process that then could be followed, but have that process in place before any maps.
And we can bring that process question back to y'all.
I think it would be good for us to do that next week before the maps start getting drawn.
We will do that, and just to clarify, in fact, the council would not be in a position to make a final decision on the sequencing of elections until the full 5 hearings have been held. So, but certainly we can bring back different criteria and different options for you to consider, and how you're going to decide what process you're going to use to decide the sequencing. But the ultimate decision will have to wait until we're through the public hearings.
Just to help us plan to make that decision, do we still have a big fuzzy red, white, and blue top hat?
We can find it.
Any other questions or comments, council? All right.
Can we, in light of my colleague's question, can we, as we're looking at suggested districts, get an idea of their voter turnout in low and high election years so that we can see if there's a district that, is that a factor that we can take into account?
Voter turnout, that data is will be provided in the information in the kits. Does that answer your question?
Divided by whether the turnout, how the turnout changes versus a presidential versus non-presidential election or off-season election.
Yeah, the turnout would be for the presidential election.
It would be useful to know if we're going to assign 3 or 4 to non-presidential elections, to know which of the proposed districts have good turnout in those elections. And again, I would like to thank you for the presentation. I'd like to thank the city attorney for the hard work she's been doing, guiding us through a very fast process. Would like to have a lot more community outreach materials going out. It came so fast. I know that it did. I'm looking forward to having a snowballing increase of folks who understand how important this is and turn out for it. And I, again, want to thank staff very much for the rapid movement on this item. This is a big change for our city. And I really appreciate the thoughtfulness with which the public has come out and spoken to us about it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to written communications. There are none. And final public comments for items not on the agenda. Mr. Hanson.
Greetings again. I'd like to thank the City Council for that contract you awarded to Gary Nelson, staffing. My answer to the homeless problem is jobs. I know Gary, I know his son, I know his company, and it's top of the line. Hopefully he can draft a solution where we're not giving handouts, we're providing jobs. My compliments on that decision. Also, my compliments on reconsidering that contract to Wells Fargo. Running $300 million through a bank that has 2 federal indictments against it for fraud against their own customers, was questionable in my judgment. Thank you for reconsidering that. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. With that, we are adjourned.